We are committed to creating a safe and supportive space for our guests and listeners, and to provide information and tools that will help our listeners understand, manage, and overcome trauma. We understand that the healing journey can bring up challenging emotions. Therefore, we want to warn our audience that certain episodes may contain discussions or stories that could be triggering for some individuals. The content of the podcast is for educational and informative purposes only, and we encourage you to practice self-care and discretion while listening, and to reach out to a trusted support system or professional if you feel overwhelmed and need help on your healing journey. Hello and welcome back to Healing and Growing Hand in Hand podcast. I am your host, Lisa Tickle, and our guest today is Rodney Lawson. And bless his heart, he's going to share his story and most importantly, his healing journey, which is absolutely fascinating. And he's going to give us so many great tools on how we can overcome rejection, because one of the things that he will talk about is that he is a rejection overcomer, which I love. So welcome, Rodney. Thank you for coming and speaking your story and sharing it. And I love it when anybody comes on here, but it's a little bit extra special when a man comes on here and shares their story.
Oh, thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa, for having me.
So tell us about you.
Well, a little bit about me. Where do I start? I am a rejection overcomer. I will say that first and foremost. I grew up in a household with an alcoholic parent who had a violent personality. And that behavior propelled me to not want to be like him. And it drove me to be successful. So I entered the corporate world at a very early age and ascended up the corporate ladder very, very rapidly. With just a high school diploma, I had went all the way up to assistant vice president.
Wow.
In the corporate world. And my first stint in the corporate world, I was promoted 14 times in 12 years.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Started as just a lowly telephone sales rep. And when I left that organization, I was responsible for their most complex location. And it was complex because it was their only international location. So I was responsible for 687 employees from over 50 different countries around the world. And we took customer service calls and made sales calls in 10 different languages.
Oh my goodness.
And yeah. So, but it all was driven behind my ACE, my adverse childhood experience. And I was determined to not be like my father. And that's what drove me.
One question I wanted to ask you, I meant to ask you before we were recording. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but on the ACE test, I was a 7. What were you, if you don't mind sharing? Do you remember?
I didn't take the actual test.
Oh, you didn't?
This was just...
Okay.
No, I didn't take the actual test. I had sought a therapist. I'm on my 4th therapist now.
Yeah.
And the one that I'm with now has been the most profound. I will say that. And that is because I started seeing her in January after the last therapist. We just weren't getting anywhere after a year and a half. And I said that, we need to talk about things that are going on with my father, as opposed to the day-to-day items. Because every time I would go down a subject in that area with my wife or any significant other, or I would see a movie and it would remind me of something, I would get emotional. So I knew there was something that was unresolved. Yeah. And I was feeling stuck. I didn't want to perform at work. I didn't want to, you just get in this mode where I just couldn't move. And it wasn't until recently with this new therapist and my spirituality, also finding a home church as well. And this group that I joined to help me find my purpose. Those 3 things came together in April. And that's when I discovered that my motivation and determination to be successful, my drive, had left when my father passed.
Interesting.
Yeah. So since 2015, when we buried my father, I sort of lost my it factor. Right now, I still had all my experiences and talents, and people still saw me as this and that, but they didn't understand how broken I was inside. So this thing manifested years later. Yeah. But it was after he passed that everything had went away. And then what I had to learn was you can't rely on motivation, because even though it might be long, and like in my case, it's still temporary. So what I had to do is I had to find what my passion was, what my pull passion was, right? Because that is the one thing that will keep you going.
Right.
And so those three things coming together help to really, really allow me to see a couple of things. Number one, I forgave my father. And all of these years, I looked at him as kind of a detriment by the things he had done or had not done. But then I started to see that what he did gave me certain skill sets and tools to make me successful, to help me help other people.
Yeah.
And it was my therapist that said, Rodney, that story you just told about how my father took me to a dark place of the most disrespectful moment in my life. How in the corporate world of leading people for more than 33 years, I had never treated anyone with a lack of dignity and respect. Never. And I had managed, in some locations, I had managed thousands of employees. Not once in my career have I ever done that. And she said, you do realize that what you gave to those individuals in teaching them to be respectful always, no matter the situation, no matter the personality, no matter the dispute, she said, you realize you got that from your father. And that's when it kind of hit me, Lisa. It was like, wow. She said, what he did was not good, but it was a gift that allowed you to touch thousands of people. And so that's when I started to turn the coin and I started to see him in a different light. So now he's no longer a detriment or an anti-hero. He's actually a hero.
Yeah.
And so it allowed me to forgive, my father in that particular light. And then the other thing that happened that was synonymous to that is this group that I was a part of, that I am still a part of. It's a community called the Purpose Company, and they help you find your purpose. And going through this journey, as I was going through one of the training sessions, the leader said very, very succinctly, things don't happen to you, they happen for you.
Yep.
And that kind of resonated with the message from my therapist. And then spiritually, I, another part of my story that I'll share is that, I'm now founder and principal owner of Rodney Lawson, LLC, which is a management leadership consulting firm. And I've been in this venture for 2 years. Now, I've started to go this route 3 times while I was in the corporate world, but every time I got lured back by the title, the perks, the trips, the lavish style, and every time I went back, not long after, I would still go through this period of being unfulfilled.
Yeah.
I wasn't getting the type of fulfillment, that I was longing for. And so it was a church that I had joined where the pastor in the very first sermon, he said, don't keep going back to what God called you out of.
Oh, yeah. That's the truth. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that was confirmation for me that I was headed in the right path. Rodney Lawson, you've been praying to God to touch millions of people with your message. And if you're going to do that, it can't be you doing it playing small and working for one singular company.
Yeah.
You have got to go out there, get out there, stay out there. And wouldn't you know, interestingly, a month later, I had an executive recruiter who had become a personal friend that I knew, and I had accepted, a job from him in the past, phenomenal job he had got me, calls me up and he says, hey, I got a company that's looking for a chief culture officer. I think you would be great for. And immediately what's going through my mind is, oh, here it comes again. And I had to, my wife and I sat down and we talked about it. And I said, look, I don't care if they offer me $500,000 a year. I'm not going to take it. Unless they want me to do consulting work with them, I'm not going to step back into that arena because I'm going this direction now. And so my message became clear. And there's 3 things that you need to be successful. My first year, I didn't do that well in my business. In fact, I did horrible. I'll admit it. But there are three things that you need. You need clarity,
Mhm.
you need community,
Yeah.
and you need consistency.
Yep.
And so for me, I didn't have as much clarity because I didn't have the right type of people around me helping me. I didn't have community, right? Community is having people that are 2 or 3 steps, 4 or 5 steps ahead of you, and 2 or 3 steps, 4 or 5 steps behind you.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that it's important to have people in front and behind, because you can learn from the people in front. But the people behind that you teach,
Yeah.
they give you fulfillment through gratitude, right? So it feeds you and it keeps you going. And if you have the clarity in the community, then the consistency is easy. See, the consistency was difficult for me that first year
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't have community
Yep.
clarity.
Yep.
Yeah. So I'll just but yeah, it's been a journey, and like wow, I'm in a place now where I'm at peace with everything. I've forgiven my father. Um, I look at him as a hero now, as opposed to someone, like I said, who had done all of these horrible things,
Mm-hmm.
to my siblings, if you will.
Oh, to you and to your siblings.
Yes, yes, there are 4 of us. I have an older brother and 2 younger sisters.
Oh my goodness. So, so your journey. So when you were in the corporate world and you left the corporate world, you said you went back 4 times.
Three,
Three.
three
Three times.
times I went. Yeah, this is the 4th time I left, but I'm done now.
Not going back. And it's
Well,
it's interesting because I had one of my therapists say to me that you can't heal in the corporate world.
mm,
And in my case,
wow.
that is absolutely true. I am not supposed to be in the corporate world at all. I don't fit in at all. And I'm okay with that now. And I tried for so many years to fit in. And I did well and I was good at what I did, but I didn't understand their mentality. And so anyway, yeah. So, okay. So,
Well, let me share
yeah.
something with that. Not understanding their mentality. One of the reasons that I walked away, the last 2 jobs I was in, was really, really, our values didn't align.
Yeah.
I would just say
Yeah.
that. I'm like, I'm all about treating people with dignity and respect,
Yeah.
and I can honestly say some of those things didn't take place, and I had a hard time with that. And, for me, it was almost like God was saying that, okay, I'm going to put you in these last 2 positions so that you can really see from the heart what it's like and what these people feel like
Mm-hmm.
and what they're going through so that you can spread this message now. Because I got to tell you, Lisa, I'm on a mission of creating a movement. I, there's this thing called your worth it factor.
Your worth it
Like
factor?
worth it, WORTH, your worth it factor. My worth it factor, and it's the thing that you look at and what you're grounded by
Mm-hmm.
that keeps you going. Like what's inspiring you to keep moving at doing what you're doing in this particular goal. My worth it factor is simple. I don't like seeing followers being led by unsavory, disrespectful leaders. That's my worth it factor.
I'm with you.
So I've created a whole movement around what I call magnetic leadership. And magnetic leadership is based off of kind of 3 things. Number one, the foundation. There's a foundation that sits at the bottom, and that is making sure that you build loyalty with your people. And only by building loyalty with your people do you have the second pillar, which is influence. Now, everybody's
Right.
seeking influence because in the corporate world, in the leadership position, you want that influence so that you can get your employees, your workers to perform, even your peers, right? You want
Right.
that level of influence. You have to have those 3 things. Well, there's something that sits beneath what I call that foundation, right? Let's say that's the earth and you're building the foundation, right? That structure that sits beneath it all are your values.
Mm.
What I have seen is that we keep promoting leadership and looking at individuals and recognizing them based off of their leadership skills
Right.
when we should be looking at leadership values.
Right.
And so that's my whole message. In fact, we were talking prior to the call, and I was just awarded a spot to do a TEDx speech
That's
at TEDx
awesome.
Greenhouse on November the 2nd. Yes. And that's here in Houston. And that's what my speech is about. It's going to be about magnetic leadership.
Oh my gosh, you definitely need to get the word out because that is absolutely true. And now, the number one reason that bothered you where they didn't treat people the same way that you did, that was one of my biggest things. And watching people being hurt and just seeing the damage happening in the corporate world. Because I just saw a lot. And and the problem I had too is I tried to be everybody's savior, and it
Yeah.
wore me
Yeah.
down. And that's not my place. That's not my place in the corporate world. My place is not to go and save other people, and I recognize that. It was just my heart was hurting so bad at seeing how these people are being treated. But the other side to that is these people need to stand up for themselves. They need to, there's nothing I could
Yes.
do to make a difference for them, in the corporate world, but they needed to stand up for themselves. And so I switched it and started to become an example instead.
Ah,
And I didn't,
yeah.
because I used to literally go to the leaders and just say, look at this, and and they just didn't care. It wasn't on their radar, and when it was on their radar, they just didn't care. It wasn't important to them, and I just couldn't
Mm-hmm.
understand that how could you not care about your employees that are helping you become successful? Like, we're a team, because without us,
Yeah.
you're not going to have the corporation. It's not going to be the successful corporation. So yeah, I recognized it, and it was one of those self-awareness moments when I did, and it was kind of it was embarrassing when I realized, oh, you're going about this the whole wrong way, that you're actually creating more problems
Mm-hmm.
for yourself. So I switched it up and I decided I need to start being
Yeah.
an example rather than trying to persuade everybody that it should be done different.
And you know what's crazy about that? There is so much leadership material out there.
Right?
You know, everyone on LinkedIn, they have this superhero armor on. They're great leaders, and you see all of these leadership things and all of these management things and development trainings and workshops and all of this. I just have to ask the question, why are there so many bad leaders,
Yeah.
if that's the case? The information is there. The problem, I think, is that we've been recognizing them based off of skill sets versus
Right.
values.
Exactly. Exactly.
And that needs to change.
And it's interesting. And I was thinking about this morning, and I think it'll apply here, but and there was something I was listening to that made me think this, that we're where we're at today, right? And then when we get elevated to a position of power, or we get
Mm-hmm.
get a lot of money, we really have to watch ourselves, because our new normal
Mm-hmm.
becomes different, and we have to make sure that we carry those values into that new
Yep.
normal, because otherwise that's when you see people go sideways. That's when you see, I always say, when it's interesting to see what comes out of people when they get squeezed, right? And it's interesting what I've seen come out of me when I've been squeezed. But in this case, it's like, so these leaders that look, that when they're young or early on in their career, they look great. But when they move up to that new level, if they haven't worked on themselves and they haven't set their values and their standards, that's where it can go sideways, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that, there's a couple of things to unpack with that statement. These new leaders that are coming up, as they're being mentored, the mentor has to get them to think about their
Right.
values and what they are and put them out on the forefront so that the right type of followers are following them according to those particular values. And it's the mentors that need to teach that, the leaders that they're looking up to. So when those leaders that they're looking up to, those mentors, if they don't have a solidified foundation with their values, then they're teaching them the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that happen so often. People, do things, they get themselves in hymns, they get themselves in different type of problematic
Right.
situations in the corporate world because they did something that they were taught or saw someone else doing years prior to and thought that, oh, it's okay to be that way. That's really how you get a lot of the sexism, the discrimination, all of that. The values say that, hey, it's okay to be that way,
Right.
and somewhere along the line, if someone would have said, as a new young leader, that's really not the direction you might want to go in, here's why.
Mm.
Here's what could potentially happen. And enlighten that individual early on. It's like a child. You're nurturing a child. You're giving them information. You're feeding them. as they're going through adolescence. And then when they get mature enough to step into that role, now they have a strong sense of solidified value.
Exactly. And I've also seen in my experience a couple things where, and these are both female leaders, which really disappoints me because I feel like, when women finally get into leadership, boy, that's big, and we really need to take it serious. And in both these
Mm-hmm.
cases, it was really sad because the one, when she was a lower leader, that sounds funny, but a lower leader, she wasn't heading up a company.
Mm-hmm.
She did really well. She
Yeah.
actually created a company. She did really well. Very admired for what she did. Very intelligent woman. Very intelligent woman. But when she moved up, it's almost like, what did somebody say to me one time? It's like she's above her pay grade. It's like that was too much for her. And instead
Mm-hmm.
of, saying, okay, I can't do this, this is not okay, it went sideways. It really was bad what ended up happening. It was interesting, but because when she came into it, I really admired her and was so impressed with her resume and what she'd done. And she'd been with the company for many years, so she had absolutely shown that she can do this. And she
Mm-hmm.
absolutely came into it like she cared about everybody, and I really felt it was genuine. And then when she moved into that leadership role, it all went sideways. All that went out the window, and it became about her. And what I think happened is she realized she was in over her head, and then insecurities rose, and she didn't know how to handle it. And she didn't have a good support system around her, or she may not have been willing to hear, like what you were saying, where someone could sit down with you and say, this is what you need to do. And the other one was a woman who I admired as well. And in the role she was in, she did really great. But I also saw in her, she has a big heart. She really is a good person. But I see the people pleasing in her. And so
Mm-hmm.
when she moved up into that leadership role, that is how she ran the company. So you
Wow.
could
Yeah,
imagine.
that's not really, yeah, yeah. Well, I will say this though, in unpacking what you just said, in working with a lot of women as individuals who reported to me and individuals who I've reported to, I will say that the pressures
Yeah.
that females have are far greater
Yeah.
than what males have.
True.
And that is because they're expected to perform at a level where the men have set the rules,
Ooh, that's a
right?
good way to put it.
Anytime you get to set the rules, you have an advantage.
True.
It's like you and I playing a game of chess, and we know what the rules are. But what if I was allowed to change the rules to suit what I want? So you're already battling uphill, right, from that
Yeah.
perspective. And so I would take the time, and I would work with women. I would work with other cultures.
Yeah.
I would share with them different things that would help us, help propel us. Like, for example, as a minority, as a woman, I would always say, ask for what you want. Because if you don't, they will assume and they will give you what they think you
Oh, that's a
deserve.
good point.
So always ask for what you want. And you have to be in a position where you are accepting of coaching and
Yes.
feedback. Right. And it's because that's the one thing that would help you elevate yourself. But I will say this, make sure it's someone that has like values.
Yes.
Because some people try to coach you in areas that's wrong
Mm.
and you don't want to go in that direction. But at the same time, if you follow, it could lead to something detrimental down the path, right? So I would always say that, be coachable, but make sure it's someone that have like values. I'll give you a little tidbit on that. I used to say when in my younger years, this statement, and you probably heard people say this, um, I don't have to change for
Oh
anybody.
yeah. I
Yeah,
actually, yes,
but
the first person I was talking about actually said that.
then I learned that if I don't change, by listening to people, I cannot grow.
Mm-hmm.
And if I cannot grow, I cannot continue to achieve goals that I keep setting out there for myself.
Right.
And it's the same thing in a relationship, in a marriage. You have two individuals and they might have individual visions and goals of what they want to accomplish, but it has to all come together to one vision. Because
Right.
if you do not, then you have division.
Right. Ooh, That's good.
And that is where, and I'm a two-time divorcee, so I know, I can honestly say that our values weren't aligned.
Yeah.
I was selecting women who, I felt what love was because it was a part of my love language, and that's physical touch. But what I needed was loyalty. What I needed was transparency. What I needed was strength from a security standpoint. Those are the three foundational pillars that I needed in addition to the affection piece. And so for me, once I discovered that, and this came through therapy, so I'm highly recommending therapy.
Yes.
Came through a therapist. And once I realized that I needed loyalty, affection, transparency, and strength, I would not date anyone until I saw those pillars. And my wife today is my wife because I saw those pillars very early in the relationship. We talked for about 9 months before we even physically got together and saw each other because we were living in two different states. I was living in Atlanta. She was living in Houston here, where I'm located today. And we met at a conference in San Diego.
Oh, my area.
When we met, we exchanged business information, and we didn't speak for 4 months. And then she saw something I posted on social media about leadership, and then she reached out and said, "Hey, where were you 10 years ago? I could have used that." So we kind of chatted and chuckled about it. And the more we talked, the more I started to see, wow, she's extremely loyal. This is the most loyal individual I've ever encountered. Right? And then I saw the transparency. And then I saw the strength from a security standpoint. I couldn't see the affection because, again, we were in two different states. So we talked for about 4 months on the phone after that. And then she said, "You know what? I want to come see you." And I said, maybe I should come see you to do the manly thing so she doesn't have to come out of her pocket for the cost. And she said, "No, I think I should come and see you." And then it hit me, right? She wanted to see if I'm living like I said I was.
Yes.
Yeah.
Smart lady.
And so, yeah, she booked a hotel up the street from my development. She came to Atlanta. We had the most remarkable time. And I'm an international traveler. And I said, "Hey, I'm thinking about going to China. You want to go to China with me?" And I had been to China twice before, but this was a different part. And she said, "Sure." I didn't expect her to say yes. So in a couple months, we're in China. But I will tell you this. When you get on a 10.5-hour flight, I think it was about 10.5 hours from San Francisco to Shanghai. When you get on a 10.5-hour flight and it feels like 10 minutes, you know that's the way.
Yep. Absolutely.
And we had the most. So that kind of, I know we kind of got off the leadership thing a little bit.
No, but that's good. I mean, that's true. Our values, when we figure out what our values are, and that's really important, what our values and our standards are. And that should affect all of our relationships, our work relationships, our friendships, our partners. I was just sitting here thinking that when you were talking about in the corporate world, because I'm even thinking if a leader has certain values, they're not going to go work for a corporation that has completely different values than them, I would think. I mean, that would be really difficult for a leader who is, present and paying attention and they've set their values, that they would go work for a corporation that has very different values than they do. I would imagine it would just be like a marriage. It's not going to work.
Right. Absolutely. You are so on point with that. And I will say this, in working with females, there are situations where I've had the opportunity to work with females that were on welfare. And now they're director, VPs all across, companies across the United States. Because they had this incredible ability to nurture. And in some cases, it was just teaching them the accountability piece. Yeah. And then some of them who had the accountability piece, it was teaching them to be more nurturing, but they were easy to work with, and they were coachable.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
I found them to be very coachable, and they excelled. They really excelled.
When they had the right leader over them and a good support system around them, of course they're going to excel. If they're hungry for it, they're going to excel. That's awesome. Yeah. That's wonderful. I mean, taking people from welfare to directors, that's amazing. I love that. That's awesome. Yeah. So you had a couple questions for me, and I like these. So how are you utilizing your skills to help others today, which you kind of are touching on right now? And why are you so passionate about helping others?
I'm passionate about helping others because I think that it goes back to my ACE,
Yeah.
right? My adverse childhood experience and being a rejection overcomer.
Yeah.
That's what I am. So I found out through working with this company, the Purpose Company, that your passion, I had to find out, I'm sorry, your purpose. I had to find out what my purpose was after kind of losing it when my father
Yeah.
passed. And your purpose is made up of four elements. One is your, what they call your origin story. And that is where something has happened to you in your life that has stuck with you as a child or as a teenager, usually in between, I want to say ages of 5 and like 19 or 20. But it's so significant that it shapes and forms how you make decisions, right? And for me, I'm a rejection overcomer. You know, I wanted to see more of my father, who was absent for, gosh, probably 99% of my football games that I played in, and I was a pretty good football player. I wanted to do more with my father growing up because I would see like my friends' fathers, you know, at their football games and participating in things with them. And, you know, my father wasn't there for that. And so because of that, you know, I developed this kind of feeling of being rejected,
Yeah.
right? And so as a rejection overcomer, that's just one element that forms my purpose and how I make my decisions. But then there are others. There's your acquired skills. There are your natural abilities, and then there are your pull passion. And those are the four things that make up your purpose. So for me, my origin story, as I stated, is a rejection overcomer. My natural ability is that I'm a truth teller. That means that I seek the truth, I tell the truth, and I respect people who tell the truth. That's just how I am. And, you know, sometimes you got to get it out. The
Yep.
truth. My acquired abilities is I am a let's see, as a rejection overcomer, truth teller. It was
I can't remember.
I'll go to the next one and I'll come back to it. So my pull passion is that I am an injustice equalizer,
I love that.
and that means that I want to see things fair
Yep.
and equitable among everyone. And so when you put all of those things together and you put it with my acquired ability, sorry, it's a strategist.
There you go. That's what it was. I couldn't remember either. You told me before we started recording.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that those four make me who I am. And when you put all of that together, it really helped me to understand who I am, how I made decisions, but most importantly, what kind of kinetic future I'm looking at and I want, right? And so that I can make the right type of decisions in the present. So I know about my past. I'm operating in my present so that my future can be what I want it to be. And that's the whole key behind, you know, kind of finding what your purpose is. And knowing all of that, again, it was this passion for just not seeing people hurt,
Yeah.
not seeing people disrespected, not seeing people belittled, not seeing people beat down. And that's because I know what it feels like firsthand to go through
Yep.
that. And so that's where that kind of passion comes from, Lisa.
I'm with you on the injustice thing. If you want to see me go from 0 to 100 in anger, if I see something, some kind of injustice, ooh, it's terrible. That's what, you know.
Yeah.
On the other hand, when it's not something injustice, it's a trigger. But when it's an injustice, yeah,
Yeah.
it seriously goes. It's the same feeling inside. It goes from 0 to just woo over the top. So how did
Absolutely.
you discover that you're a rejection overcomer? You're all those different elements. How did you discover that?
That was discovered through this company called the Purpose Company. I was struggling trying to find my way, and it was actually my wife that found the company and said, "Hey, I think this will be good for you." And she set up a call. I got on a call with the guy, and I was still skeptical. And before I agreed to join, I said, "Listen, this was like our third call." I said, "I have two questions. how many people fail in your program? Number one. And number two, why do they fail?
Good questions.
And he said to me, he said, Rodney, he said, we don't keep metrics around how many people fail, the percentages and all of that. So I can't tell you that. He said, but I can tell you why people fail. He said, it's only two reasons. He said, number one, they don't do the work. And he said, number two, they're not coachable. I committed that I would be coachable and I would do the work.
Yeah.
And it was like an 8-week program of modules that you go through at your own pace for this part, as well as group coaching calls and one-on-one feedback and all that. And the 8-week program, I could have wrapped it up in 2 weeks, I'll be honest with you.
Did you dig in?
Because, there were 3, 4, 5 in the morning that I'm going through from module to module. I couldn't get enough about how I was discovering myself. Let me show you how powerful this is, right? I told you that I was a strategist, a truth teller, an injustice equalizer, and a rejection overcomer. So my wife and I, although we have a beautiful relationship, we would get into these debates, right? She would say something to me like, you never let me finish. You always jump in with the answer. And, that's really frustrating. Well, when I went through this program and explained to her and articulated precisely how I'm made up, how I'm wired, by me being a truth teller and by me being an injustice equalizer and by me being a strategist, I put things together really fast and I formulate an opinion and I have to communicate it. That's who I am. And I, after sharing that with her and her understanding who I am, oh my God, Lisa, she just gives me so much grace in that area now because she understands.
Right. It's not you were being rude.
This is right. It's just how I'm wired. Even coaching individuals, like I've coached a lot of individuals through tough situations in the corporate world who sought me out. And it's almost like being kind of clairvoyant, if you will. I can't really see the future, but I can really, really, really keenly predict what's going to happen based off of a person's behavior in a situation. And I'll give you an example. I was working with the gentleman once, coaching him, who had hired me as a personal consultant. And he was having trouble with the person that he reported to. And so I said, tell me a little bit about the situation. And he explained a lot of things to me. And just make a long story short, I said, listen, people like that usually fall in 1 of 3 categories. They either are afraid of losing their job. And so they're acting in, 1 or 2 different ways that is not conducive to you being promoted or being moved up or doing your job well. Right? And these are the type of people that would take your ideas, that would say something unsavory about you if it's to protect themselves, right? Because they're afraid.
Right.
Okay. Number 2, they are in a position where they're in over their head and they just don't understand that they're rubbing you the wrong way and rubbing other people the wrong way. So it's like being unknowledgeable, being unaware, right?
Yeah.
Or number 3, some people are just jerks. I hate to put it. No, really.
It's true.
They get a high off of seeing other people in pain.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I fired that guy. Oh, yeah, I couldn't wait to fire him. Why is that something to brag about? You took this person's livelihood away.
Yeah.
You know what? If they're not performing, like every person and I've had to terminate a lot of people in my career, but every person that I've terminated, I've given them grace. And I've had people thank me. I've had people give me hugs. I had people reach out, even after I terminated them, because it was done with dignity and respect. And leading up to that termination, the accountability was all on them because I had coached them all along.
Yeah. Yeah.
It wasn't this last minute thing that, we just, no. So those are the 3 things that we had to figure out. And once we figured out how this person was operating, then it was easy to coach the guy on how to handle the person he reported to. And then, within a month, this guy was shining, a shining star, was, a superstar, because he knew what his boss was like. He knew how to handle this guy. He knew how to operate in that mindset.
You empowered him.
And so that's one. Yes. Hmm.
Absolutely.
Just one of the examples.
That's so interesting when you talk about, when you can look at a situation, you can kind of predict where it's going. I totally get that. I can do the same thing. I can, and the frustrating part though is you can't fix it. I mean, you can try to guide people,
Yeah.
but you can't fix it. And that can be frustrating when you're witnessing something going on like that and they're going in the wrong direction and there's nothing you can do to change that.
Well, here's what I learned a long time ago for me that helps me. This may or may not help you, but I'll share it
Okay.
with you in an audio. For me, I own it. When I know that it's a problem coming and they can't see it, I own that. I take it in, I immerse it. It is me. It is the accountability is on me. Once I communicate that to you, whether you accept it or not is up to you. But once I communicate it to you, I take the weight off of me. I no longer own it. You own it. And so what you do with it is up to
Mm-hmm.
you. And so at that point, if I'm sitting here and I'm seeing that, okay, this person didn't follow right the direction, so they have to own that now.
Yes.
But I no accountability after I give it away. But once before now if I don't communicate it, it's all on me. It's all my fault. I own it. I'm accountable 100%.
Mm-hmm.
But once I communicate it, they own it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's an important factor around communication. And this came out of me realizing that the monster that my father had inside of him, I also had inside of me.
Mm.
And that is, even though I've gone through my corporate experience, career, by treating no one with the lack of dignity and respect, I had that propensity still within me in my personal lives and my personal relationships
Oh.
because that's all I saw.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And it was based off of triggers,
Yeah.
right? And so what I did was I said to myself, I was going to therapy, hey, I'm a smart guy. I can figure this out. I've developed training programs and taught them. And, so let me create something for me for this. So I created PRT 123. Okay. So now whenever I'm triggered, I pause.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the P stands for. The R stands for I have to respond, but respond with grace and candor. The T stands for take, meaning I have to take accountability for my response.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's good, if it's good, pat myself on the back, reward myself. If it's bad, then I need to beat myself up a little bit. Because sometimes people can say, well, I didn't respond that way, but it was slightly a little sarcastic. And even that is not the right approach.
You're not being
okay,
authentic.
so that's the PR. Right. Pause. Respond with grace and candor. Take accountability. Then you got the 1, 2, 3, which is the communication part. Most people only focus on the one, especially when they're triggered, especially when they're in a heated argument. The one is what you say.
Yeah.
I just want to get it off the chest.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
The most important part is the 2. The 2 is not what you say, but it's how you say it.
Yes.
Your body position, your facial expressions, your tone. Is it coming from a vulnerable place? It's how you say
Mm-hmm.
it. And then 3 is simple. It's did they take the message? Because if you do it in that order, communicate what you want to communicate, understand that it's important how you communicate it, and you do it in the appropriate, vulnerable way, then 3, chances are they'll take the message. Right? And so by me creating PRT 1, 2, 3, I know what my triggers are when they're tapped into. That's how I handle it.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to share that with you in the
I
audience.
love that. PRT 1, 2, 3. And that's what I do. I mean, what you were saying about the message, it is all in how you deliver the message and how you say it and your tones. And coming from somebody who used to be proud of the fact that I could shred people with my tongue, and I used to be kind of proud of that. That's way back in the unhealthy days when I would get triggered, ugly would come out for sure, and I learned, when I became aware of that I had that. I remember my ex-husband telling me that, he used to say you could write letters to people to make them cry. I'm like, ooh, that's not a good thing. Right. I'm not okay with that. And I'm glad he said that to me because, he was joking, but he was right. And I started paying attention to it took me a while to figure it out, though, I'll be honest, because I didn't have anybody supporting me or helping me, but I figured it out on my own, is how you deliver the message, the words that you say, like you say, the tone, your body,
Mm-hmm.
and what message are you trying to deliver? I mean, that's the first thing you have to
Right.
think about. What message do I want to deliver? And that is what helped me formulate the right way to say it to them so that they will be. I mean, if I come at you and I'm like, I'm raising my voice to you and I'm calling you out on stuff, as opposed to, hey, let's sit down and have a talk about this. And, people
Right.
they're not going to be receptive if I'm yelling at them.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So that is a skill. And those of us healing from trauma, we really have to be careful of that, because it is when we're triggered when ugly comes out of our mouth. I mean, I'm not proud of that. But when you learn, like you say, how to manage your triggers, taking that pause, because I would take a pause and there's that pause between the trigger and the response. And I would take a deep breath and I would reformulate and pay attention. What is going on in my body? Why am I acting like this? What caused the trigger? And then I can
Right.
kind of formulate the response, because the first response that's going to come out is not going to be good for anybody.
Right.
And I got
Right.
I got tired of cleaning up messes.
Yeah, that's usually the case.
So I love that you share that. And that, that's just true in everyday communication. And, do we want them to respond to what we're having to say, or do we want to turn them, make them angry, basically?
Yeah.
So this will be fun. This next question I really do like. What type of transformations have you seen in individuals you work with? I definitely want to hear about this.
Oh, wow. Gosh, I mentioned working with women that were on welfare, and now they're VP and director levels
That's
with
huge.
companies. Um, this might be unique also. At one particular location, we actually hired individuals that were, quote unquote, what you would call street hustlers, drug dealers.
Mm,
And but they had the values. Like when I interview, Lisa, I don't interview just for experience and skills. I also interview for values and
right.
character. I look for that first, right? Because I want to know what you're going to do when my back is turned.
Yeah, exactly.
And because those individuals were honest and sincere, um, I felt like I could trust them and believe in them that they would walk this path and not go back in that direction. I brought some of them on board, not all of them that we interviewed, but some of those individuals are at director and VP levels with companies as
They
well.
just needed a
Because
chance.
they were smart. Yeah, they were smart in what they were doing. It was like, look, but that's against the law. You do it this way. I can show you
Yeah.
how to be successful. And these are skills that are transferable no matter where you go or what you do. And guess what? You don't have to look over your shoulder anymore.
Yeah.
And so individuals like that. But it all goes back to caring for people,
Yeah.
right? I want to see people win. I want to see them successful. Because one of the things that I learned in this purpose group is that when you operate in your purpose, that is the place where you get maximum fulfillment.
True.
You see, when I worked in the corporate world, expensive luxury cars, building houses, traveling the world, all of the perks, the titles, that's great. And that's what a lot of people see. But that's not where you get your true
Right.
fulfillment. Fulfillment comes from when you take the greatest gift that God has given you and you utilize it to help someone, and they come back to you and they say, I've done this, I've done
Mm.
that. And let me give you an example. And this, I'm an emotional person, as you can see.
That's
This makes me
okay.
a
I
little
love it.
emotional.
I love it.
I'm gonna tell this story. So I was working at a location once where I was in a manager position and I had peers, and we were hiring supervisors. We had 4 slots available to hire supervisors, and we're looking at our staff. And the person who had the most by far skill set, that had proven leadership ability, all of that, my peers didn't want to hire her because they didn't feel like she dressed professional enough. And they would not come out and say that. They just kept saying, we just don't feel like she's ready. And I kept pushing back in the meeting and saying, we are in the performance business. And somebody needs to correct me if that's not what we're here for. Because she is by far the best performer when it comes to coaching individuals up. And we're going to turn that down because we don't want to coach something in another area. So that doesn't make sense to me. And so I kept pressuring and pressuring and pressuring. And the director that we worked for at the time, he had a rule that we all had to agree on the management folks that we would hire because they could end up reporting to any one of us at some point.
Oh, right.
This is why we had to be in unison. So we ended up hiring this young lady. But what they did not know is what I did not share because she made me commit to secrecy. Right before she got employed, her house burned up. So she lost all of her clothes. That's why she couldn't dress as professional. She was 10 years my senior, so she was older than I was. But she was a good person. She had good values, good character. She loved people. She helped people. She coached people. She learned the information so fast. And so we ended up hiring this young lady. She did really well. I then get promoted to senior manager, and I'm at another location, hundreds of miles away. 3 years later, I get a phone call, and it's her. And all she's doing, Lisa, is she's crying on the phone. And she kept saying to me, no one believed in me but you.
Oh, God.
She said, Rodney, today, I just won our quarterly Circle of Excellence Award, where we recognize the top 1% of the company. And she said, I also got promoted to manager today. And she said, nobody believed in me but you. Nobody. You had to be the first person I had to call and tell this. And I hadn't heard from her in like almost 2 years.
Oh, my gosh.
And in that moment, Lisa, that type of fulfillment is unmatched.
Yes.
It's unmatched.
Yep.
Because it touches your soul, right? I had to walk out of my office, walk out of the building, and walk around the building to get myself back together, my composure together. Because, man, that fulfillment, that's what I do.
Yeah, there's nothing else like it. There's nothing else like that.
Nothing.
No amount of money, no amount of prestige, nothing else that I mean, I get what you're saying. I mean, it's similar to when I help someone along and I help them in their healing, or I even witness someone healing. Mm-hmm. It can be overwhelmingly emotional. It's amazing.
And you know what's interesting about that? When our director had made a judgment call and he said, you know what, Rodney, you're the type of person that will coach people in areas that other managers and leaders will not. So I commend you on that. So, we're going to go ahead and we're going to hire her, right? And I said, great, and with her earning a higher salary, right? Going from an hourly wage to a salary paycheck, she was able to improve her professional dress within, I don't know, I want to say probably 3 months, and the director that I worked for, I got to tell you, phenomenal guy. Because when he found out about it, he later did find out about it. He gave his corporate Amex card to one of the female managers and told them to go take her shopping and to buy her 3 business suits. Yeah.
So you were working with like-minded people. They just didn't know the story.
Right. And that director and I are still, he ended up getting promoted to VP. I mean, but we're still close to this day.
We need more of you. We need more of you, seriously, because you saw something in her that nobody else saw.
I think they saw it. They just weren't willing. They just weren't willing to do the tough coaching, the difficult coaching for them. For me, it was.
Oh, that's a good point.
Again, I'm a truth teller, so I'm going to tell the truth, but I'm also going to give you a soft landing space. I'm not going to come at you from a harsh standpoint in coaching.
Right. Oh, that's a beautiful story, though. I love that. That's a beautiful story. Oh, I know it's so.
I've got hundreds of them. Believe me.
Well, tell a couple more because our listeners need to hear that too. And you see somebody. I mean, the thing is, I have a heart for I'm the one that rescues all the animals that nobody else will rescue. That I just have a heart for that. And I'm the same way with people. I've had to learn not to be an enabler because I would cross over into that line,
Yeah.
right? So I had to find balance in that. But it is so rewarding to hear these stories, and so I would love to hear a couple more stories if you want to share some.
I'll share one more
Okay,
with you. Yeah, I have a couple of key ones that I'm saving for my
got
TEDx
it. Okay,
speech,
so we'll listen to them then.
but I'll share one more with you. Uh, I was working with a gentleman one time. I had promoted to a supervisor, and I'm his manager, and had a lot of skills, very solid character, but went through a period early on, like within the first month or so, where he had a substance abuse problem with alcohol, and he couldn't control it, and but he had a lot of skill set, a lot of potential, and he came clean and said, "Hey, I need help," and so we got him into this program, and he go through this program. So he's going to be sort of on medical leave for the next 6 weeks or so. And so after his time was up, he calls me up on the phone and he says, "Hey, Rodney," he said, "we're all asked to give a presentation. And I'd like you to come in and be there, for my presentation." And I said, "Sure." I said, I'll do that for you because a part of, you have to support your people. That's just my belief system. And it's part of what I call being a magnetic leader.
Right.
And so he said, "Well, there's one caveat." I said, "What's that?" He said, "It's on Christmas Day." And I, uh-oh, at the time, I've got two little kids. I've got a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. And then, of course, my wife, my ex-wife now, but my wife. And he said, "Well, it'll only be for like an hour or so, but I really want you to be there." And I said, "Well, let me talk to my wife and I'll get back with you." And I spoke with her and I said, "Look, it's Christmas Day. It's only for a couple of hours. But I think it's really important that I be there." And she supported me and said, "I think it's important that you be there too." And so I go on Christmas Day to see him speak. And I'm sitting there. He did a wonderful job. There's about 30 people in the room watching. And there were probably about 7 or 8 speakers in the program that were graduating from the program. He did a really good job. We were chatting after the presentation, and I'm getting ready to leave. And I'm walking towards the door, Lisa, and he calls me. And he says, "Hey, Rodney." And I turn around. And he says to me, "You're the only one that showed up for me today."
Oh God.
You see, while I'm sitting there in the
Oh my
audience,
God.
I didn't know if family members were there of his that I did not know, if friends, relatives, because I didn't know anyone. It was just me. I just knew him. And when he said that to me, "Rodney, you're the only one that showed up for me today.
Oh my God.
No family member, no relative, no friends, but his boss showed up." I got to the door. I got to my car. I remember driving to the first street and then just putting the car in park and just
Yeah.
this emotional bomb just hit
Yeah.
me. Now, that's not where the story ends. Listen to this. This guy goes on to become the #1 supervisor in the company
Oh my
in
gosh.
performance. This guy is the only person that I witnessed to ever max out all commission amongst every single person that worked for him.
Oh.
Okay. This guy then starts dating one of the other supervisors under another manager, which was totally allowable. And since they had gotten married, but he started dating one of the other supervisors who had been a supervisor 2 or 3 years longer than him. But then all of a sudden, that supervisor's performance goes up. So
Ah,
he's coaching her. No, really. So he's coaching
oh my
her
gosh.
outside of work, right? And so what that told me is that this guy's ready to be a manager because he knows how to coach supervisors. This guy goes to that Circle of Excellence quarterly destination award ceremony, and he wins the best of the
Oh,
best. That means you are the top person out of all 1% in the company. This guy, then we promote him to manager, and guess what? He becomes the number one manager in the company and wins best of the best.
and it all it
And we're friends. We're friends to this day.
I was gonna say, and
And this
all it took was you believing in him.
and this was back in
Oh
1994.
wow.
No, I'm sorry, 1992. 1992. Yeah, that early on.
Oh my
Mhm.
gosh, what an honor to witness that, to be a part of that and
Yeah,
witness that. But it took one person to believing in him. Really,
yeah.
truly, authentically believing in him and supporting him, and that's what happened.
I saw his character though, Lisa. I saw his values. I saw who he was, and very rarely did I ever come across someone that was so passionate about helping people become successful.
Mm.
And most importantly, he had a complete balance in one of the workshops and courses that I teach. It's called the 33 and a third rule of management. Ironically, this is the one thing that I put on social media that my wife now saw and was like, "Where was you?" So your most profound coaches, leaders, they have a balance between how they motivate people, how they develop people, and how they hold people accountable.
Okay.
What happens is that a lot of leaders, managers, etc., they're off balance
Hmm.
and they place too much weight, too much intensity in one area. When you do that, it creates chaos. It creates a lack of performance. For example, if you're too heavy in the accountability area and you're not motivating and developing enough, no one wants to work for a person like
Yeah.
that because they hold you accountable for everything, but they're not even developing you and they're not even motivating
Yeah.
you. Okay? If you place too much in the motivation area and not enough in developing and not enough in holding them accountable, now you got a quality problem
Yeah.
because you're giving them all this inspiration to just go, 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 but you're not worried about coaching them to make them better, and you're not worried about holding them accountable to doing things the right way because it's all motivation.
Right.
Then if you put too much in development and not enough in motivation, not enough in accountability, what you have is still dismal performance because you're not motivating them on what you're coaching them and you're not holding them accountable to what you're coaching them. And those two things are keys to make the coaching takes place.
Right.
Well, this guy, he came with so much intensity, so much weight, but he was completely
Hmm.
balanced. He placed so much passion in developing people. He placed so much passion in holding his people accountable to high standards. And he placed so much passion in motivating and inspiring them. And that was uh, like the core to his success. Not a lot of people come with that much intensity, that much weight,
Yeah.
let alone to have equally
Yeah,
balanced.
yeah, that's the trick is having them equally balanced because otherwise, like you say, there can be
Mm-hmm.
chaos. I'm all about balance. I mean, every day it's a balancing act, right? Every single day it's a balancing act. So,
And that principle, that training, I actually created that way back in 1989.
and it works.
Yes, and it works, and I've been teaching it ever since, and it works.
So your company, tell us a little bit about your company, um, and what it does, because I want the audience to understand. Because people might be wondering, can I reach out to him? Can he coach me? What? Yeah.
Absolutely, yes, that's what I'm here for. So my company, I primarily work with executives and mid-level management folks that are looking to um, form a better, stronger relationship with their employees, building that loyalty that I talked about, so that they can garner that influence. And in turn, what happens is their employees are more engaged,
Hmm.
their retention goes up, all of the factors that we want out of an employee and management relationship. So I work with individuals in that particular area. I do workshops, I do trainings, I do one-on-one coaching, but I also take the time to keynote speak. So I go into corporations and I do keynote speeches on all of these things as well. But in addition to that, what I find is that the one-on-one coaching that I do, it crosses over into a lot of different areas. It's not just what's going on the job. So there are times when I've taken on clients to work with people who it started out as what's going on in the work world, but then we end up talking about different things. Like one of the individuals I was working with was struggling with a difficult relationship of what him and his wife was going through. And we were in a session one day and he was just like, man, if I just couldn't take it, if she would just shut up sometimes, she just needs to shut up, you know? And I said to him, I said, I want you to imagine something with me. Close your eyes. And he closed his eyes. And I mentioned his wife's name. I said, I want you to imagine her getting into a car accident. And you rush to the hospital to see what's going on. And as you stagger into the hospital room that she's in, her larynx is crushed. And the doctor tells you, and the doctor says, Mr. Such and Such, and I won't say his name, Mr. Such and Such, I'm sorry, but your wife, such and such, she'll never be able to speak again. I said, open up your eyes. He opened his eyes. I said, is that what you want? Is that what you want in a relationship? And he stared at me and he said, no, not at all. He just said, wow, man.
Yeah.
I never thought of it.
Yeah.
He goes home, and I don't know what took place, but the next day, as soon as I got in the office, he says, Rodney, I need to see you in the conference room. So we go into a conference room, and he breaks down in tears. And he just starts hugging me, and he's crying. And he's like, man, thank you. Thank you. He said, you don't know what you've done for my relationship, for my marriage, just with that simple 5-minute exercise. And so that's the type of things that I'm talking about when I work with people. It's not just what's going on in their job. A lot of it crosses over into life skills. And this is where, that clairvoyancy that I talked about, where you can read situations and try and help them through it. Because I knew that, especially as a man, if you want to connect, you have to come from a place of strength. And the problem with manhood is that a lot of manhood views vulnerability as a weakness. Yes. But it is not. It is not. And I needed him to go back home to his wife and be vulnerable. And that's what he was.
Yeah.
Not knowing, but that's what he was. And that's why that relationship took a turn. And again, we're still close, real good friends to this day, like all of the others.
Yeah, it's in order to connect with people, we have to be willing to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And
so I just told you another story.
I know. I love them. I love stories like this.
I told you I've got so many of them.
I'm sure.
33, 34 years, you acquire a lot.
Yeah.
And, locations, like I said, I had thousands of employees. So
but
there's a lot that happens.
How cool it is to have those stories and to share those stories. And, we need more of you. We need to get this word out. Absolutely. And I was going to say too, people act out for a reason. People don't just wake up one morning and decide, okay, I'm just going to be a jerk today. It's the same thing with children. We act out for a reason. There's something going on. It even could be something as much as mental health issue or something like that. But there's a reason why. We don't just wake up one day and one day we're a nice person, the next day we're a jerk. There's a reason why.
Right.
And what you do is you see that, you understand that, and that is how you approach this person. There's a problem here. Let's just figure it out. Let's figure it out so that we can move on. Where some of the old approaches is attacking the person. I mean, imagine what most managers would do to that person, right? They would shred them.
Yeah.
I mean, I experienced that
Yeah.
myself. But that's what it is understanding that people act out for a reason, and we just need to find out why. It doesn't mean that there's not going to possibly be consequences still. But
Right.
our first thing is to just try to understand the person, and that's what you did.
Yeah. You know, it's funny you say that, and because I was going to address that. I do believe in holding people accountable, and I do have high standards. That's why I've gotten results. And my career, Lisa, spans across multiple industries and multiple positions. Let me give you an example. I started in sales, that's where I cut my teeth, but I have led customer care, customer service
Yeah.
organizations. I've built management divisions. I've led sales organizations. I've run operational facilities. I've worked offshore, running an operational facility in Guyana, South
Wow.
America, for 2 years. So my experience crosses a gambit amount of industries and
Yeah.
positions. And it's because early on, I understood that the basic fundamentals of leadership doesn't change. So as I'm stepping into some of these roles and I know nothing about the
Right.
product, I know nothing about the service delivery, but I know I've got people that know. And I know that if I can share something with these people to help them, to help promote them, then they can share something with me about learning a product, learning a service, and we can form a very good working
Mm-hmm.
relationship so that we can deliver. And that's how it happens. But it doesn't mean that it always happened the right way. I could share stories with you where I have had to hold people accountable
Yeah.
and, had to terminate individuals because you communicate expectations, you communicate the repercussions, and you do it in a respectful way, right? And if those expectations are not met, then you follow through with the
Right.
repercussions. And it's no mystery, it's no mystery, when it
Right.
happens. Um, you know, People pretty much understand. Unless it's a layoff, a big layoff or something like
Yeah.
that, then people know because if you communicated the expectations being clear. So I just wanted to make that point that it's not just connecting with people and coaching people, but it's also holding people accountable to a high
Yep.
standard. Because remember, it's that balance:
Correct.
motivating, developing, holding accountable.
Right.
So I just wanted to
No,
share.
I'm glad you finished that because that's true. That I mean, we need to be held accountable. We absolutely need to be held accountable. So I'm glad you mentioned that because I didn't want to present it like, oh, you just can see through all this and it's all easy. People, we do
Right.
need to be held accountable. Yeah, absolutely.
And I wouldn't be where I am if I wasn't held accountable as
Me
well.
either. Me either. Me either. That is so true. Well, if the listeners wanted to reach out to you, how could they find you?
I'm gonna keep this real simple. I'm all over social media at Rodney Lawson LLC, but I'm gonna keep it real simple. For people that want to get in touch with me and they want to be a part of this movement that I'm creating, my network, the word magnetic, magnetic, text magnetic, magnetic to 33777.
Okay.
If you text the word magnetic to 33777, then you'll go through questions and you'll enter into my network and we'll stay in contact.
Ooh, I might be texting you.
Great.
We'll see. We'll see. Well, this has been. Oh, one more question. What do you want to leave the
Yes.
listeners with?
Uh, let's see. There's so many things I could
I'm
say.
sure.
If I want to leave something with you, I want to leave you with this. When you see unsavory leadership, gracefully call it out. Call it out. We're seeing so
Yeah.
much in today's world. Um, and I certainly don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but in the political
Yeah.
realm,
The hot mess that
we're
that
seeing it
is.
in the corporate world. Yeah, we're seeing it in the corporate world. We're seeing it all over the place where the leadership is just, it's based off of this connection that's not value
Mm-hmm.
based. And so when you see that it's unsavory, in a respectful way, I say, call it out. Just bring it to that person's attention. Take the ownership off of you because you saw it and put it on them.
Yeah.
That's what I want to leave our listeners with. That would be my call to action. When you see it, address it in a graceful way.
Yeah. Watch your words, right?
Yes.
Well, this has been fascinating. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing and
Likewise.
sharing your story too. Because like I said, I always appreciate it when men come on and share their story because, it's harder for men.
Yeah. Well, I will say this. There's no mystery now. The cat's out of the bag. I'm an emotional
I
individual.
love it.
But I am unapologetically about two things: my emotions and my spirituality. And I have to say that because I realize that if I don't allow my emotions to
Mm-hmm.
flow, then it builds inside, and then my natural reaction trigger is to
Yep.
come back through, you know, and I don't want to do that.
Yep.
And so I found through therapy that just let the emotions
Yeah.
flow. That's who you are.
Unre-
That's who you are.
uh,
People either accept it or they.
yeah. Unresolved emotions turns to anger,
Yes. Oh gosh.
right?
Yes.
And especially with
Yes.
men. And what have we taught our men? To be aggressive.
Yep.
So
Be aggressive. Hold your emotions
yeah.
in. Don't
Yeah.
cry.
No
I
crying,
heard all.
suck it up, buttercup. Yeah. That whole thing. Yeah. My girlfriend of how many years now? Gosh, we've been friends for 35, 40 years. And we have been discussing that very subject for over 20 years. And just how men are
Wow.
raised and that there's a lot of stuff put on them that's just not right, and now there's
Yeah.
beginning to be a movement about that. We need to raise our men different.
Society, yes, society has taught us that. But I will also say this: challenge the norm. I've always been an
Yeah.
individual because of the truth teller in me. Now I know,
Yeah.
right? And the injustice equalizer is that I've always challenged the norm. So I'll give you an
That's good.
example of something. I'm 57 years old, and I have never ever taken a sip of alcohol in my life. Never. But it was because of what I saw from my
Yeah.
father. Now, I don't frown upon anyone else that does it. Everybody around me does it, and I'm cool with
Right.
that. And, you do is what you do. But for me, that's just one of my grounded values
Mm-hmm.
that I've never taken a sip of alcohol. Now, a lot of people have tried, especially in the corporate world, playing sports, in college and high school, parties and all of that. And I did hit the club life in my younger years, but never taken a single
Thank
sip.
God. Seriously,
Yeah,
thank God that you never did take a drink, because who knows where you would be today. Seriously. Mm-hmm.
exactly. Exactly.
Well, thank you for not taking a drink. Seriously. I'm so glad you were here, and I'm so glad you shared, and
Oh, thank
I'm
you.
so glad
It was my.
you're out there making a difference. And I mean, that is what I was hungry for when I was in the corporate world, is someone like you, someone that understood. And I was not finding anybody like that. They all kind of had that corporate mindset, and it was very frustrating. But I also know for me, that's not where I was supposed to be anymore. So, but God had to make
Yeah,
it
yeah.
really uncomfortable before I finally left.
I understand. I understand. We led you in that direction too.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
well, thank you so much. It's been great. And I just really appreciate you being authentic and sharing this. It's actually been really fascinating.
Wow. Well, I appreciate that, and I will definitely let you know once my speech is done on TEDx,
Yes.
and it'll be aired.
Yeah. Cause
Yeah,
I want to
I
watch
can't
it.
wait.
So
Thank
excited.
you.